Okay, so we have some questions about margin and padding, and that is something that is a common question. And the way that I like to think about it is in terms of frames, right? So we have this wall here, and we have got a separation between the frames, right? So here we've got a separation, here we've got a separation, here we've got a separation between this frame and that frame. And then you can also think about if our product is this painting or this inside, you've also got the width of the frame. So the way that you can sort of think about it is that our margin is going to be the distance between, right? So if I've got this to here, that's not great. Let me undo that. This is too big. The margin will be like from here to here, right? This portion, what is in between these two. So if I have some margin, that means it's going to push it away, right? It's going to push this entirety of this frame away from this frame. What padding does is padding is basically the width of the frame. You can sort of think about it as the width here. So if this is my div or this is my element and I add some padding, what it does is it pushes everything away. So this whole thing, this whole thing here is my padding, right? And so it creates kind of this layer between each element. Like if my margin was 0, let's say that my margin was 0, then maybe these would be lined up side by side, right? Like if this was 0, basically this would be right here and they'd be immediately next to each other. What padding does is it creates a separation all the way around my element. So in this case, if I had a div, if I had a p tag, if I had some unordered list, then it would create some distance completely away. So this whole thing would be my padding. This here, the distance between this element and this element, this is my margin. And so it's a way that I can push things away, push things around, create padding for paragraphs or for making things look nice or pushing things for different reasonings, right? If I wanted this to have a margin right, and I wanted here, I wanted this to be pushed to the right. I want to push this image this way. Then I can have some margin right. And so it's what's separating the two versus padding is creating sort of this layer around the main element, totally around this, similar to like a frame, right? And so these would have different, if you sort of think about it that way, this padding here would be different than this padding here. Right? The edge of the element is this outside piece. Anything that has to do with margin is anything this way of that. What padding is what's the difference between the edge and where the actual element starts. In this case, it's this frame. Does that make a little bit more sense? Are there questions or anything I can clarify on that?
That was clear to me. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Somebody asked where to watch my lectures. They're all right here. Let me clear this, sorry. Right here. Or where all of our lectures and office hours are. So
It's a
somebody
little
says
bit.
the border inside or outside of the margin. It would be on the where the border ends is where the margin is, if that makes sense. So if you've got a border around, then where that border ends, then if I've got like margin right, then it would be pushing from the end of that. Somebody said, so the block was the colored block. Sorry, I'm not quite following that one.
So padding is kind of like spacing away from whatever you're trying of the object you're trying to make space for in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is a great picture from Christina. But here we've got, let's say our content. We've got our padding, which is pushing away from our content or our element. You might think about it that way. Then you've got a border around, and wherever the border ends, this is, you can kind of think about this as the edge of our element. Then if I've got some margin from the top, I'm going to push from here up. That is my margin. The distance between one element. So starting at the, let me annotate right here. And let's say my other element is right here. That's a terrible color. Right here and right here, whatever this distance is, that's my margin. So let's say I had, another element here. That would be my margin. The padding is just creating some space around. So let's say I wanted my element to be a little bit larger, but I wanted to position it where, let's say I had a paragraph and I wanted to look a certain way. Then I could push some padding, and that's usually what will happen with like paragraphs. Is that we can have some padding, expand it, and then keep our element the same size, but then it kind of pushes our content and makes it look a certain way. Yeah, exactly like what's in chat. Margin is the distance, an element to another element. That's a great idea. And then the padding is the distance content to its border. That's a great great kind of idea there. Because your border, you have a border, it just might be super duper thin, right? And so padding is what separates it. Similar to how a frame operates, right? Like this, there's a greater distance from the end of this frame, right? You would call this like the end of the picture. And then here, maybe let's say that there was an actual picture in here is the picture. The distance between the end and the actual content itself would be my padding. And then the distance between this whole entity and this whole entity, that distance would be my margin. Great questions. Okay. Any other kind of questions on margin padding? So in this picture, somebody said, so where's the border in this picture? In this theory, we would say that maybe this is a good example. See how there's a difference here? There's like the image, and then there's some space, and then some space, and then this sort of frame. So taking out, let's just thinking about border here. Let's say, for example, that this, here, I'll make a square. Let's say that this is my content right here. This is my element. This is my content, right? That black frame is my frame, or my border, sorry. And in the distance between that frame or my content and the frame right here, this would be my padding, whatever this distance is. Would be my, and then this would be my border. This actual black frame would be my actual border. Just as for this example. Hopefully that kind of helps there. Any other questions on margin and padding? Or anything else I can kind of clear up there? Okay, I'll pause the recording in case we do something else. When we're talking about colors, there's a couple ways in the same way that we just talked about how there's ways that you can do pixels or you could do percentages. In the same way of that, you can identify colors in different ways. So what you can do is there are a couple different ways that you can do this. You have some named colors, and that full list is here. But you also can say RGB, which is red, green, blue, right? And it is a hue. So if you say, okay, RGB, this is mainly red. So if you got 255, it's kind of a weighted portion, right? 255, 0, 0. That means it's all red, no green, no blue. Therefore, it's going to give you red. If you have all of them together, sort of think about us being chemists and mixing colors together, gives us white. If we have none of that, the absence of color is black, and so on and so forth. If you start mixing colors, if you mix red and blue at this certain proportion, you get magenta, but you don't have any green in there. So that's just a way that you can do it. There's a extension in, there's an extension in, oh my gosh, Google Chrome called Color Picker. So if you like ever want to get an exact color, you can do that. So it allows you to see a color, and you can even see that it gives you two different options. If you wanted to do RGB or if you wanted to do hexadecimal. Hexadecimal, all it really is there's a kind of a correlation between some letters and a color, right? So it's sort of like a code. So FFFFFFF or whatever, however many Fs there are, that means white, right? And just hexadecimal. All zeros is black. And so what you can do is like with Color Picker, and I would definitely say it's just a free extension. It's called Color Pick Eyedropper is what it's called. But I can go and hover over any color, click on it, and then I get both the RGB. So it is, again, these are weighted red, green, blue, and that code equates on a computer to this color of blue. Or I could give the hexadecimal of 36C2DB, and that will also give me this exact color of blue. You can use either. It does not matter. Yeah, it literally does not matter at all on which one you want to do, or which one, if you want to do RGB or hexadecimal, either or. It's just two different options when it comes to saying what color. And then you also have the named colors. So like here you've got cyan. That's just a named color and it already knows what that is, right? Usually I don't like to go with named colors because they're generic and you don't necessarily get the exact color. Like if I wanted this exact color for my background and see how this is different than this, I could do the Color Pick Eyedropper, and this color right here, this 4C4545 is different than this 2A, 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 2929, right? These are different colors. If I wanted this exact red, I could get it right here. So that gives me this kind of like a more exact color versus a generic cyan is this guy right here. So if that makes sense, that it's just a different way that we can call colors. Yeah, Adam's got a great point. If you do use this color pick, you're going to get this guy right here. You got to make sure you add the hashtag, the pound sign, the number sign right here before to get the hexadecimal. It just gives you the code, doesn't give you the actual. Like you can just copy and paste this, that's fine. But if you do the hexadecimal, make sure you add in the number sign as well. So that way you get the actual hexadecimal color.
Okay, that makes more sense. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Okay. So now we are on the infamous level 9, and it says select all the small plates and bentos. What do we think here? Okay, so we got plate, comma, bento is what Reba says. So what this is grabbing is all the plates and the bento. This is giving multiple elements. Right? This is applying or saying, I want to target multiple elements here. I press enter. Perfect. Way to go. That comma allows for multiple elements. This is selecting all things. If I wanted all things, yeah, great job, guys. If I wanted all things, I just put the star. The star is going to be all things, all elements in there. If I want to apply something. Perfect. Select everything on a plate. Select everything on a plate. Let's see, if I just say plate, Let's see. It doesn't work. How do you plate all? There we go, right? So using that tool of, okay, I can do all, and then I'm saying everything inside of a plate. Okay, we're on level 12 of 32. Now select every apple that's next to a plate. So Reba says we got plate plus apple. There we go. So every apple next to a plate, we say, okay, the element plus, if it's got something next to it, element plus apple, it grabs this guy right here. Element plus element, in this case, is apple. So plate plus apple. That is going to get all apples next to a plate. Because that's what's going to tell us this next one, right? So like it goes plate, apple. So plate plus gets us to that next element, and we say apple. So in CSS, what does the plus sign mean? Let's check. And the reason I do this is if you guys have questions, let's jump in and see, okay, well, what does this mean, right? These are how we will dive in and figure out what is going on. Let's see. The plus sign. It's an adjacent sibling combinator. Combines two sequences of simple selectors having the same parent, and the second must come immediately after the first. So div plus p, background color green. So that's saying if the div, now these are siblings, right? So it's got to be adjacent sibling. So when I say div plus p, because this is a child, it does not call that. But is the adjacent to this div right here, it's the next one. And it does not get this last one because it's just div. And then if it's an adjacent p tag, that's what we do. Therefore, that background is green. And it's only one. Note that it's immediately after the first. So immediately after this, oops, this div, but it's only one.
So it has to be below it on the page? Like it wouldn't be the, okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't go the opposite, right? Because in case, if that was the case, then this guy.
P right there, the first would get taken as well.
Yeah, so it's whatever. So if you would say like, you would have to target that specifically, right? Via class or however you'd want to do that. Because this is a child of this div, so you couldn't say, you know, container P. It wouldn't work. Unless like is immediately. So if I wanted to use the tilde, like let's say I wanted to get everything after, then it would be this guy. Yep, I can put this in the chat. This is kind of all the P's. Remember, this plus sign is just one. And then the tilde is everything after. So let's say I had 30 of these, right? It would kind of add that sequentially to all 30 after this div. So that's how, I mean, even in just having those questions, this is a great thing to kind of look at. But then also when we're trying to figure out why does this work, it really is. The reason I kind of just Googled it was to show that when we don't know something, it's really, you don't have to know everything, right? Like that is, please get that through your head, is you do not have to know everything. Nobody is going to expect you to know everything. It would be weird if you knew everything, right? And so, you got to get, it sounds really stupid, but you have to get good at Googling, right? And asking questions and understanding. And so that's why we are going to, in class, if you guys have a question, I might just go Google that, right? Instead of like, oh, it's this, because sometimes I don't even know, right? And so getting used to, if you're inquisitive or you've got a question, go ahead and just quickly Google it, because that's a great way to learn as well. Okay. So we got to 12. Well, I guess we got to 13 technically, but we will continue doing these. We're about to have class. I'm gonna go down and get some water. We'll continue doing these for,